Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Victor Schock. I work for the North Dakota Public Service Commission. Among other things, I'm responsible for investigating and processing complaints the Commission receives alleging violations of the North Dakota one-call law. I've read and reread this section of law hundreds of times, and while I can't say it's a very interesting read, it's necessary to fully understand the 811 requirements in North Dakota. I don't plan on reading the law to you today, as I doubt any of you will find that very attention-grabbing. However, what I would like to do is talk about what the PSCA is and what we do, a few specifics in the law that pertain to tree planting and maintenance, and then tell a few stories about what can happen when the rules are not followed. All of this in the hopes that having more information about the requirements of 811 will help you avoid violation or a safety-related incident. Just have to note, even as I say this, I can't help but think about a short horror story called I'm from the government and I'm here to help. So, what is the Public Service Commission? It's a constitutional agency with varying degrees of statutory authority over electric, natural gas, telecommunications, railroads, auctioneers, weighing and measuring devices, mines, and most importantly for us today, damage prevention. What we do, we enforce the law, and we also promote safe digging. What we don't do is provide training, draft legislation, or define the specifics of how excavation is performed. For specific training on things related to excavation and damage prevention, you can reach out to the North Dakota One Call Board. I can put you in contact with some very good folks there who have good training presentations available for you. The legislation, we do make recommendations and things like that from time to time, but for the most part, we try to stay out of that, as it's really not in our realm. And then the specifics of how excavation is performed, it's absolutely not in our area of expertise to say how you go about in digging a hole. It's more so about that you're doing it within the guise of the law. So let's move on. The North Dakota One Call notification system requires all parties to do their part. As an excavator, you're responsible to input your ticket with accurate information in a timely manner. The One Call Center then must collect the information correctly and provide it to the correct underground utility owners. Then those underground utility owners must accurately mark their facilities in a timely manner. Each of these pieces is important, and that fact is not lost on the PSC. We do have a complaint process. Anyone can fill it out, from an excavator, operator, homeowner, to some neutral bystander. You saw something happening, you can fill this out. You can find it on our webpage. Also from the North Dakota One Call website, there are links to it from there as well. But if you can kind of take a look through the form here, it has a lot of boxes, but it is really simple to fill out. If you kind of look, the top section is just who is submitting this form. Just so we have your contact information, so we know if we need more information. Next section is about the company or person who you believe violated the law, so that we can get a hold of them. The next is what the violation was. There's some specific checkboxes there that you can check. If it really doesn't fit into any of those, there's an other box where you can just kind of describe what kind of violation you think it is. And then we do need the location of the violation, the date and time of the violation, and then as good a description as you can write up. All of those pieces are very important as we're kind of going through the law, because as we get law changes, the date and time get really important. We've had some where something might be okay before a law change takes effect and not afterwards, or vice versa. Location as well, we get into some territory issues with certain things. And then the damage, that's primarily going to be filled out for someone who owns an underground facility, so they can say, had a 2-inch pipeline hit, and this is how much it costs to repair, this is how many customers were out, things like that. But certainly an excavator could fill that section out as well if he had some sort of damages that resulted from him hitting something that wasn't marked, for example. And then at the bottom, we just ask you to sign the form and date it as well. So we'll move on here to ticket information. First up, when to call. Seems pretty simple, but as the law has always said, 48 hours. However, there was a slight change to this back in 2017. It's still 48 hours, but the time doesn't start until midnight after you make the call. What this means is if you call on Monday, it doesn't matter whether it's morning, midday, or evening, the soonest that you can be able to start digging is Thursday at 12:01 a.m. Or As another example, if you call on Thursday, the soonest you could dig is the following Tuesday at 12:01 a.m. It's a minor change in the law, but it's definitely something to be aware of when making your plans. Keep in mind, you can always call earlier than you need. You can call in a week or even 2 weeks before you intend to dig and specify the actual date you intend to begin digging. This ensures you don't get into a time crunch for yourself. It also helps those underground facility owners as it gives them even more time to locate. Normally they only get about 2 days to get out there and mark their stuff. If it's a busy time of the year, they appreciate having those extra days so they can kind of schedule things a little bit better. So everyone enjoys it when you give them a little bit more time. Next up is all facilities must be located within 2 feet on either side of the marks. This means you must be careful when excavating within 2 feet of the markings. Now there is an exception for this for water lines that were installed prior to August 2013. No, you don't need to know when things were buried. That's the responsibility of the operator to let you know that their water lines are old and or the markings for them may not be within 2 feet of their marks. Another time-related issue here is tickets is only good for 21 days. This means from the date you specify you will begin digging, you have 21 days to finish. Now, if you haven't finished or you've started and it's getting close to the end of the 21-day window and you're not sure if you're going to finish, you can call in for a relocate request. Again, it's important distinction. If you're digging on day 22 and hit something that was not marked, even though you can see every other mark on the site, you know with certainty this wasn't marked originally, you're the one in the wrong because you're working outside of the dig window for your ticket. So very important. Keep in mind of that 21-day window. You can always call in for those relocate requests. Call them in, let's say a week before you're going to expire, just to kind of be safe. Finally, you must remove the flags when your excavation is completed. It's not the responsibility of the party who put the flags in the ground, but rather you as the excavator who submitted the locate request to remove those flags. Particularly, this is important in areas where livestock may be present. The flags are more than just an eyesore, they can be deadly to livestock. Okay, next up, you may begin an excavation before your work to begin date, provided all operators on your ticket have provided a positive response on the ticket. We'll get more to the positive response a little bit later, but this is a potential scenario that can kind of help you out with some time issues as well. Next up, piggybacking. This is using the locate ticket of another excavator. For instance, if a general contractor calls in a locate request for a construction site, that ticket does not extend to the subcontractors. Each company must have their own ticket. Similarly, a landowner or a homeowner calling in a ticket for their property does not cover another party excavating on that same property, even if all other details of the ticket is the same. So just keep that in mind. If you were going out to plant trees on someone's property, having them call in a one-call ticket does not cover you. Your requirements under the law, you need to call in and get a ticket for that. Excavators must call in a modified locate or a new locate ticket if their excavation area changes. So this is, maybe you get out on site and you need to go a little bit further in one direction or another than what you originally thought. You need to call that in as a relocate or modified ticket. And the time frame kind of resets for that new area that wasn't in your previous ticket. So make sure you keep that in mind. You can't just call in and then automatically start digging there. You have to wait until they have an opportunity to come out and mark in that area. Finally, depth and type of excavation is what determines if a ticket is required. If you want to be safe and don't worry about all the details, simply always assume if you're moving dirt, you need a ticket. Now, get into those specifics. Some examples of when the answer may be no, you don't need a ticket, are gardening and landscaping, providing that you're not digging deeper than 12 inches. Now, that depth is extremely important. If you were to dig at 12.5 inches, not have a ticket, you are doing an official excavation that requires a ticket, and you'd be in violation of the law. Similarly, farmers don't need a ticket to plow or cultivate a field, provided they are not disturbing the soil deeper than 18 inches. These depths may seem arbitrary, but they do have some meaning, and for safety, it's important they're remembered. The 12 inches kind of coincides with the depths of many natural gas lines on residential parcels, and 18 inches power lines. In most areas, these lines are not required to be buried any deeper, even though in many cases they are. You just simply can't count on that. You can never associate what the exact depth is of a facility. That depth of cover is based off the grade at the time the line was installed. So if someone has come along since it was installed, changed the grade or elevation, what may have originally been 2 feet of cover is now only 6 inches. So again, this is why you can never assume the depth of cover. It could be 4 inches in one spot where you kind of pothole it or dig down to it, and it could be 3 feet in another spot. So don't count on those depths always matching up. Next item you need for your ticket is location of the excavation. Imagine many of you are doing more rural tree plantings and may call in a quarter section or larger dig area. This is another area that changed in 2017. Something called white lining is now required. If you're calling in a residential lot, prefer that you use white lining, but it's not necessary. If you're calling in a larger area, such as a quarter section or large parcels, you must use white lining. White lining is simply identifying the area you intend to dig. Now, this can be done with white paint or white flags on the ground at the site, or you can do it digitally on a map. Kind of pull up a Google Earth or something like that, circle the specific area in that parcel you intend to dig, and you can submit that to the one call center with your ticket. Here are some details of the options and exclusions. So as I said, a single street address is an exclusion. If it's an emergency excavation, which we'll get into that a little bit later, or a meet request, meaning you're intending to meet with the operators on site. And then the options for how to fulfill that requirement: white marks on the ground, project stakes on the ground, a detailed drawing or map, digital white lining, a GIS shapefile, or other arrangements between the parties on the ticket. Okay, another new one is a survey ticket, primarily used for survey or planning crews to plan a route of a pipeline or power line, sometimes even for road projects. And they can be useful in other situations where you need to know what's buried underground, but don't necessarily intend to dig at this time. Some things to keep in mind with them: they do have a longer locate window, so the operator has 5 full days to locate their lines or share the information. They can physically put the flags and paint on the ground, or they can fulfill their requirement by sharing mapping information or meeting with the ticket holder. Some of that gets important when you get into some of the larger transmission lines. Some of the specific location information is protected by Homeland Security rules, so they can't share exact information as far as maps. But if there were a ticket on site, they can put paint and things like that down. Similar to other tickets, ticket holder is responsible for maintaining and removing the markings, and the tickets holder is responsible for the cost associated with relocate requests. Okay, and the ticket size rules do apply, same here. So an emergency ticket. So there's an exception in the law that allows an excavator to bypass most one-call requirements if the excavation is an emergency. Right on this slide is the details of the law of what allows you to bypass, what you need to do in an emergency. You need to take all reasonable precautions to protect the underground facilities. Give notification and compliance with this chapter as soon as practical, and that an emergency exists. And then each operator as soon as they possibly can. So provide all location information that is reasonably available to the excavator. Now, what's important here is the definition of an emergency. I think we can pretty safely say that there's probably no tree planting emergencies that exist, but some examples of what may qualify as an emergency. I mean, I think officially the law says immediate threat to life or property or essential public services. But some examples might be, let's say a water line was busted by accident and they need to dig down to make a repair or to stop it from leaking. That potentially could be an emergency. Similarly, if gas or a crude line or something like that is broken and they need to dig down to stop the flow out of that pipeline, that could be considered an emergency as well. Okay, positive response. new requirement on operators since 2017 requires locators or utilities to notify the one-call center when locates are done so that excavators are alerted and may excavate as soon as possible. These are the traditional statuses that you will see put on the tickets by the operators, and we'll go through some examples of this in a later slide. I think actually the next slide. But these are kind of some of those statuses. So clear, no conflict just means that the operator has reviewed the site. They don't have any facilities that they believe need to be marked, so they're clear. Marked, pretty self-explanatory. They mark their stuff. Should see paint and flags on the ground. Not complete or in progress just means locator has spoken to excavator and made arrangements. So this one, you see this status, hopefully you've received a call from a locator and they've made some sort of arrangements with you. And then the last one, no locate spoke to excavator and excavation is completed. This is kind of an odd status we don't see very much, so I'm not really going to get into that one. So this is what the screen looks like when an operator is entering their positive response information. They can put all kinds of comments, status code, what their contact person was with the company. Once they submit it, this will be the general status you will see if you pull your ticket up online, and there should be a link that you receive with your ticket. This is what it's going to look like as the kind of the final status. So this for this one, the first One Oak Rockies midstream here says not complete in progress. Hopefully they've made some sort of arrangements and they're figuring it out. Continental Resources has marked their facilities. They've also put an additional note on there saying, hey, if you're going to cross our pipeline, you need to make sure we're on site. A lot of pipeline companies will have that in place. It's actually not them being sticklers or trying to control what you do. It's actually a PHMSA rule for transmission pipelines. So that's kind of where that comes from. And then we have Montreux Williams Electric, Missouri Valley Communications, and Northwest Rural Water District have all marked as clear, no conflict. Simply, like I said, meaning that they don't believe they have any facilities in the area. So they're kind of giving you the go-ahead to dig it up. And then this is a more detailed status you can get into of the ticket that gives you every different status that someone put on there. If you kind of look through here, some of the companies have multiple entries on here. So when they first get a ticket, the locator might say, I've not yet responded on this, which kind of is just an indication that they've seen it and they haven't gone out there yet. Next up, size ticket excavation area size limits. So there's no limit for how much work can be placed on a locate request, was the previous rule. Since 2017, your ticket size is limited to, in an urban area, 3 contiguous city blocks. I know contiguous is a funny word. Hopefully everyone knows what that means, but it's essentially three city blocks that are connected to one another. We spent a lot of time arguing about that in stakeholder groups, so that word just kind of rings in my brain a little bit. And then in a rural area, 4 contiguous, again, quarter sections or 5 linear miles. So quarter sections, if you're calling in those kind of large parcels, you can only do 4 quarter sections. It doesn't have to be in the same section of land. It doesn't have to be the same 4 quarters of that section. They just have to be 4 touching quarter sections. And then the 5 linear miles is more so for like a road project, for example, where they're just doing a kind of a straight line that's not very wide. You can call in 5 linear miles for that situation. We do have one change that's pending for 2021. So the legislature is still, as many of you know, in session. This one, the commission did actually propose, PHMSA wants our law to say that. And PHMSA, for anyone who doesn't understand, is the Federal Pipeline Hazardous and Hazardous Materials. It's slipping my mind right now. Federal government that controls pipelines has specified they want our law to include a requirement to call 911 if you hit a natural gas or crude line, for example. And at present, the law doesn't say that. So we asked the legislature to make that change. And it's still working its way through. I believe it passed the House and it still needs to go through the Senate. I don't expect any changes to it. Expect that to go through. But that's something I can't tell you for certain whether or not that's happened. So we have finally reached the end of the boring stuff, and now it's story time. So first example, hydrovac pressure. An electric utility started receiving calls of an outage. And this is kind of to set this whole stage here. This is to show you that even hydrovac can be damaging. I've heard of a lot of these kind of cases over my years here. Hydrovac, if anyone's unfamiliar, it's basically the way I like to break it down and make it simple. It's a pressure washer and a shop vac. Granted, it's a very high power pressure washer and it's a very big, powerful shop vac, but that's the long and the short of it. You're using a pressure washer to kind of break up the dirt and pothole, as they call it, a location, and then the shop vac is kind of sucking out that dirt and mud to expose the facility. So electric utility started to receive calls about an outage. A short time later, a call came in from a contractor saying they had hit an underground line. Contractor was using a hydrovac, and the pressure from the wand pierced the cable jacket and insulation. Hydrovac crew reported seeing 3 to 4 bright flashes. The wand pressure was 4,000 psi to help cut through frost. The cables were 4 to 5 feet down, but so was the frost line. The contractor's bill for repair was $1,200. So again, hydrovac isn't specifically defined as a mean of hand excavation, but is generally thought of as more similar to excavation because it's usually pretty gentle in what it hits. But when you have that high pressure trying to cut through frost and things like that, you can do damages to cables and or coatings. I've seen that quite a bit. There's some old pipelines that Cenex in particular has buried around the state that they have essentially like a tar coating around them to protect them from rusting and things like that. And nearly any pressure of hydrovac is just going to blow that coating right off of it. So they get pretty worked up about folks using hydrovacs around their lines. And I think we have a picture here. Yeah. So in the center there, it's kind of tough to see. The center cable in it has a hole, and the hole is through the sheath of the cable. While I don't expect you're going to be a whole lot of hydrovacing with planting trees, it's good to be aware of the abilities of the equipment you're using. Next up is landowner post. Landowner pounded in a post where he was planning to plant a tree. Oddly enough, I thought this one was quite applicable to us. The oil company saw a post a few days later and sent a locator to investigate. Now, this is something that's pretty common. So underground pipeline companies in particular, the ones that have big transmission lines, they have folks that will either do aerial patrols or on-ground patrols of their pipeline from time to time. Now, this isn't like the cops. They're not out there patrolling daily necessarily, but they do try to stay current so that they're familiar with their pipeline route and if they can notice when things are different. And in this case, someone noticed, hey, there's a post, and I think we got a line pretty close to there. I don't remember seeing a ticket, and it's pretty easy to search the one call site for tickets based on a location. And they went out to investigate. Post was installed directly over the top of a 6-inch oil line. The post was 49 inches into the ground. The oil line was 60 inches into the ground. So here's a quick little test, see what anybody remembers. 49 inches into the ground, is that something that requires a ticket? Exactly, the answer is yes. You do need a ticket for that. Even if this is, so in this case, this was someone putting a post to note where he's going to put a tree. Even if this was a post for a fence line, that's still deeper than what you're permitted to go without a ticket. So you would need, excuse me, a one-call ticket for that. He did not have a locate request for it. Landowner thought the lines were further out into his field. He didn't think they were kind of along where he was intending to plant that tree. The cost to verify the line location was $1,500. It seems a little excessive to me, but things cost what they do, I guess. I will note, so in this picture, you can see there's the post, obviously, and then you can see the yellow flags going along of where the route of that pipeline was. I will note, we wouldn't necessarily say that landowner is responsible for those locate costs because he didn't actually damage anything. While he did still, in my opinion, violate the law by not having a ticket for that excavation, he didn't cause any damage to it. Doesn't make it okay. Just kind of wanted to point out that distinction. So here's kind of my last example of what can happen out there. So contractor was excavating for alleged buried valuables. Sorry, I'm just kind of catching myself up in my notes to make sure I have all of the details in here. No locate ticket was called in. The contractor observed evidence of previous excavations in the area, so he didn't really have any concern that he was doing anything that needs a ticket. Work had to be stopped for a week as a result of this excavation. An estimated cost was basically immeasurable, just due to the damages that you're about to see here. And this is me conducting that excavation. Hopefully this is a little bit fun for you. Fun little side note, actually. The North Dakota one call law, technically that would be an actual excavation that requires a one call ticket. Now, we've never had a complaint for a kid or an adult, for that matter, playing in a sandbox or at a park digging a hole, but there's no exceptions for such things in the law. So this is all I have. Look forward to answering any questions you may have. Keep in mind, if there are no questions, I'm going to be forced to revert back to telling more stories. So thank you all for your time, and let's have some questions.
All right, Victor, do you have another story in your back pocket while those people think of some extra questions?
Sure. We always got stories. So
I really enjoyed listening to that one, and I was pretty on the edge of my seat when I heard about the gentleman at the playground, and then saw that picture. So
I just stumbled upon the picture like the week I was kind of working on this presentation, so it was just kind of by chance, like, oh, I kind of think I have to use this one.
it was awesome.
But anyway, yeah. So those, obviously that was just a fun example, but those other ones were real life ones that can happen. Some of the other kind of stuff we've seen over the years. So one of them was here a few years back around Bismarck. There was a contractor putting in an addition to a building here on the south side of town. He had talked to the owner of the building. They both thought they knew where there were buried facilities, and neither of them ever called a ticket in. So the guy went in to start digging for a foundation for this addition. They get about 4 or 5 feet down, and they run into a big clay pipe. And it was big, probably I would say about 2 to 3 feet in diameter. And it was, looked extremely old. It was made of clay and not kind of modern materials that you see pipes made of. And they just made the assumption, oh, this is just an old abandoned line. We don't need to worry about it. We don't need to call anybody. So they proceeded to actually build the foundation of the building, essentially right over the end of this pipe. So they built the foundation. They actually built the entire addition without any other problems. The building was up, and I believe this was about 3 to 4 months later. So the construction happened in November. The following spring, the city of Bismarck was working in that general area, actually just on a completely unrelated project. There was no official issues that they were seeing. Someone wanted to mess with a parking lot in the area, so they were going to kind of check out elevations of the storm sewer system in the area. So they pulled up a manhole cover, and the storm sewer was full up right to the bottom of the manhole cover, which is something that's not supposed to happen. The system is supposed to be basically draining itself constantly. So they're like, well, first of all, what's going on? Second of all, what are we going to do if there's a big rainstorm? There's nowhere for this, rainwater to go. So they pumped the water out via trucks to another kind of leg of the storm sewer system. And then they ran cameras down the line to figure out, okay, what's plugging this thing up. And the pictures that were submitted from the city on this complaint we received, it shows clear as day. I mean, they're inside of a pipe, and then all of a sudden there's a wall, a literal concrete wall on the end of this this pipe, and that wall was the foundation of this building. So once they figured out, okay, exactly where this wall is, and they figured out that this was a recent construction, they had got to the point of, okay, well, now what do we do to fix this? I mean, this storm sewer line is absolutely in service; it's needed, and there were all kinds of options thrown around, including actually completely tearing down the addition to the building, because they weren't sure which was going to be cheaper, and they ended up routing this storm sewer line around the addition, and I think the total cost was somewhere around $60,000 to do that. And what ultimately ended up happening, I think the building owner ended up getting hit with most of that. The contractor kind of folded up and closed shop. I think he opened under a different name at some point later, but it was a huge cost and inconvenience for all parties involved. I mean, the city had said several times that they were just kind of lucky that there wasn't a big downpour rain event or a big spring melt event, or they would have had flooding issues on the south side of Bismarck from what happened there. So I guess that's one. And another one that keeps popping into my mind. We had a few of these. I couldn't say with specificity who was the contractors involved, but when you're working on the western side of North Dakota over the last few years with all of the infrastructure that's been put in the ground, there's a lot of really big lines out there, and the damage and danger to those lines is one thing, but the cost that can come along with it isn't just limited to the cost to repair a line. So I know I've seen at least a couple of incidents where an excavator may or may not have a ticket. I know one of them they did, and one of them they didn't, but they damaged a 12-inch natural gas line, that's big enough. That's transmission level stuff. It's high pressure. I mean, if you would puncture a hole in that, you're talking explosions and all kinds of terrible things. But the two incidents that I ran across, they didn't damage it to the point that it was leaking, but they damaged it to the point it had to be repaired. And the repairs were still significant. I think it was probably $40,000-$50,000 for the repair, but on top of the repair cost, they had a lot of lost gas, because with a gas line, it's miles and miles long, and you've got to get that gas out before a welder comes in there to try to make repairs. So they end up losing a huge volume of gas, and that volume of gas can be very valuable. I know in one situation that was estimated to be up to $400,000 just for that lost gas. I'm not sure if the company was ever successful in getting that from the excavator or his insurance company, but gets to be really serious dollars on those kind of things out east, or out west. I guess that's all of the fun ones that are popping to mind.
Yeah, that story about South Bismarck sounds really terrible. I live in South Bismarck, and I can't even imagine what would have happened had that gone any more south than it did.
Right.
That's a terrible situation. So
it is.
I can't believe they just so happened to figure it out.
Right. Because it really, I mean, the way it happened, it could have been they found out when the storm sewer system is backing up, and during the middle of like I said, a big rain or a big snowmelt event, and
right,
then it's too late. I mean, there's nothing you can do. I mean, they can hook up pumps to help a little bit, but they can't get around it. So yeah, it's scary stuff. What's out there? There's those old things. I mean, a lot of especially on the south side of Bismarck, that was probably put in the 50s, so it probably looks like really old, outdated stuff when you have clay pipes under the ground. But I guess as long as it works, they're not going to change it out.
Can't say I blame them, but wow,
right.
That is an insane story. I just can't imagine what I would do.
Right.
Does anyone have any questions at all for Victor? We have a little bit of time left, so if you do, please sound off in the chat. Well, it doesn't look like we're getting any more questions. So, Victor, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
No, just appreciate everyone's time. And again, if you have any questions on this, the kind of the details of this law, we're happy to talk about it. So you can reach out to the Public Service Commission or to me directly. You can find our contact information on our website, psc.nd. And we can get you in contact with other folks as well. Like I said, there are training opportunities available for the one call system if you want to get into lots more details on that through the one call board, and I can put you in contact with those folks as well. So thanks everyone for your time and for letting me ramble on about the law.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Victor. I sure learned a lot, and I didn't know about a lot of this. So one day when I own land, I'll definitely be calling 811. So
Fantastic.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, if you would like to return to the main session, feel free. And then closer to 2:15, I'll get those breakout sessions created for the 2:15 time spot. So I am going to leave this session, and thanks for joining this one.